Good evening, everybody, and thank you again for coming back tonight. Tonight is going to be Dad's Night. When I was preparing for an earlier episode in regard to depression during pregnancy, I was very, very surprised to see that fathers also suffer depression in the post-delivery period. Do you know that 1 out of 10 dads will actually experience postpartum depression, and that 18% of dads will go on to have a more serious mental health problem in terms of anxiety or OCD? Are you aware of that? So tonight we have two fathers on who are going to share what it was like for them during the pregnancies of their wives. We have Mr. Michael Jones, who was with us a couple of nights ago talking about dad to dad in Norfolk, Virginia. He serves as a dad engagement specialist. And also Mr. Halase Beloy, who is a lawyer and a dad. Halase's children are 1 and 3. Michael's children are 16, 13, and 8. So we have a great opportunity to kind of hear from dads with children in different age groups. So welcome, Halase. Welcome, Michael. Thank you so much for being with us tonight.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for having us.
So I wanted to ask you, were you aware of those statistics in regard to depression for dads? And the other thing that I would like to find out, we've been talking about the healthcare system and being able for families to kind of know more about how the system works and to take action to be more engaged when it comes to decision making. So I'd love to throw it out to you, Halase, in regard to is this new information for you?
Brand new. Brand new information. It definitely is not information that I've ever heard of or knew, or even knew that there were studies going on to figure this stuff out. So I have not heard anything about any statistics that look into that.
Michael?
So I knew that the research was saying that men were experiencing postpartum depression, but I did not know that the rates were as high as they are. So that is both surprising and alarming that it's that high, especially with, like Halase said, so many fathers not knowing, so they could be experiencing it and in a position to receive some support, but not know exactly what's going on with their bodies and with their minds in relationship to postpartum depression. So no, I was not aware that the stats were that high.
Yeah. So I'd like for you all to kind of go back in time. You know, you both have had children with your wives, and just wondering, when you were going for prenatal appointments with them, did you feel like you were seen as a important partner in all of this, or did you feel kind of sidelined when you went for care with your wives?
Well, for me, I think it was kind of different for me because of the fact that my wife is a nurse practitioner. Mm-hmm. So a part of the approach, I think initially, I myself was not as, I was deferential. I was willing to defer to my wife's judgment, because this is what she does for a living, or at least she's in the medical profession. And so she's always dealing with people in these positions under, different scenarios. I just remember going, and I was just basically clueless, right? I came into this whole dad thing super clueless, not knowing anything I grew up in Zimbabwe, and where there's a very strong sort of gender roles and segregation of the genders or separation. So no previous child responsibilities or looking after kids, or even the expectation that I should know how to do anything like that. So um, I came into it like that. And so initially, you combine that, you're married to a medical professional. I was really like, well, she will know what they're talking about. She'll make the best decisions. But I think individually, as the process went on, and these you know, we're going to meet on this date or something like that, appointments. And my wife would say, "Oh, well, you don't have to come, or you don't have to come." But I was like, I'm going to be there, and I was always there. I made sure I'd come, and I wanted to learn. I wanted to understand the process, and be, just as good as she was in terms of understanding what happened and what happens, and asking questions. I'm a very, inquisitive person. I ask questions. I try to understand what's going on. Maybe I'll have you repeat it. I didn't get it. Please explain that again. Um, Also, I think just in the very nature of pregnancy is that each pregnancy, I guess you could say, is unique, and things go. You can't just assume that my wife knows every scenario that happens, um, and also if you want to be more supportive, obviously you probably need to know more about what's going on, just in case there was something that was going on that you know it wasn't good. So I did my best to learn. I don't know that. I think the. I mean, I would say that if you're talking about how I was treated or how the discussions went, I would say that yes, the fact that my wife was a medical professional meant that the questions that were being asked were generally me asking the questions. So I think that it was never really a situation where my wife needs to know the answer as well. She already knows the answer, or it doesn't have it. Doesn't care to dive deep into it. Like because I was not knowledgeable. I would need maybe a little deeper of a dive into the subject matter, whereas my wife already knows what's going on, and she's not really interested in knowing. So a lot of the times those conversations were directed towards me more just as a fact of not knowing um, the information previously, and
Right.
but they were willing to talk. But like I said, that was just me and my own initiative. If I
Sure.
didn't ask those questions, the doctor would probably just confer with my wife. My wife would say, "I get it," and I would just be like, "Is it all good?" And then I would have just said nothing. But just the desire to learn and the desire to be more knowledgeable about the process and everything about it meant that I did talk to the medical people more, and
Okay.
they let me know their thoughts.
Okay. How about you, Mark? How was it for you?
So my experience was a little bit different. My now wife at the time was my fiance. So we were engaged. Of course, she had her own separate medical insurance. And what was really striking at the time was when she went to the doctor and found out that she was pregnant. The first thing that the doctor said was, "Well, do you want an abortion?" And her response was, "That's something I have to talk to my fiance about." So, as the father of the child, I was disregarded from the very beginning of the
Hmm.
experience. And
Hmm.
so, of course, we made the decision to, have my daughter. And I can recall some of the early doctor's appointments. I'd be there with my wife, almost all of them. I'd be there with her. She was my fiance and then my wife by the time we had her. We had my daughter. I would have to tell them, like, you're going to put my name on the ultrasound because the memory of this experience, my daughter's going to know that I was there from every step. And so, of course, the initial conversations were more directed toward my wife. The doctors didn't ask me, what doctors and nurses and staff, persons, ultrasound techs, they didn't necessarily ignore me, but they weren't asking me any questions. They weren't giving information to me. There might be some information that would be given to her, and then I would ask questions, and it was given to us. Not long after we got married, I think the situation began to change because they treat you differently when you're moderately low income, not necessarily educated. I was college dropout at the time, undereducated, moderately low income, unmarried. The medical profession, especially for people of color, treats you a little bit differently. And so I don't feel like I bore the full brunt of that, but my initial experience wasn't very positive. I did have a very good, open, healthy relationship with my wife's doctor for my first child in California. And then the practice that we went to in Virginia once we moved, all the conversations were directed to both of us. Questions were asked of both of us. Options that were presented to both of us. But my initial experience in that process wasn't one where I felt like I was included or that I was valued. So yeah, no, that wasn't my experience.
I want to bring up the issue of HIPAA, HIPAA, which is the Health Insurance Protection Act, where it's needing to have permission to share medical information with others. And it's very important that everyone knows that you can name who you want to receive that information. I don't know if any of that had anything to play into it earlier, but I also validate the experience that you had. I remember now you have to remember, I've been a midwife for 40 years, and I remember having to really fight for fathers to even be able to be present for prenatal appointments. And I appreciate the conversation of needing to ask questions. And I'm wondering whether or not those questions were entertained in a positive way, or was it a sense of, well, you're bothering me, not wanting to share this information. So we're kind of hearing, which is really good, both sides, where Halase's wife is a nurse practitioner, a medical professional, and then there's more desire or openness to share information. And you, Michael, are going in as the fiance and being totally ignored. So these are real realities. And this is why we're having this conversation, because when we're talking about fathers experiencing depression, it doesn't start after the baby's born. It starts during pregnancy. It starts there where you're disregarded. You're not even embraced. You're the father of the baby, and you're not embraced in that way. So let's talk about when it came time for the baby's birth. How did that go? I mean, I'd be interested with that in terms of, okay, now the prenatal period, perhaps they've come to see that you are playing a very critical role. You're there for all the prenatal appointments. Good grief. How much more can you show that you're actively involved? How did it go when it came time for the hospital, which I'm assuming both of you all have babies in the hospital? How did it go with that?
In terms of how I was treated in that labor and delivery experience, I'm very satisfied. By that time, we had developed a good rapport with the staff, with the primary care physician, with my wife's doctor, and so every decision that was being made, we ended up having to have an emergency C-section. And so from the time that we went into the hospital till the time that we had the emergency C-section, she was communicating everything with the both of us. Any question that I had, any concern that I had was addressed. And so to your earlier point, I think some of it was just a part of the rapport building process. I don't necessarily feel like it was a situation where it was HIPAA, more that the doctors might have just been more used to talking to the mothers, and culturally, doctors don't. The fathers aren't there for the appointments, so mom's taking off of work and dad is still at work. But in my experience in the hospital, I felt like I was listened to. I felt like I was a part of the process, that I could ask and answer questions, that they made space for me to care for my wife while she was in pain and agony and labor, that they didn't interfere with that process, because sometimes it can be overly medical and just kind of here, checking off boxes, and they push us out of the way. But in my first experience, it was one where I felt comfortable, and it was a positive experience, especially for it to be kind of traumatic with what led to the emergency C-section. I think they handled it pretty well.
How about you, Halase?
I would agree in terms of how things were by the time we got to that point. I mean, my wife really liked her PCP lady, the OBGYN. She was a Black lady. She really liked her, and she was a very, we had our baby at Georgetown Hospital, so it's a very quiet hospital. It's not as busy as the other major hospitals in DC. So, the attention was a lot more. I mean, I don't recall whether there was even, I think when we had our baby, there was only two, there was like one or two other kids born. So, we had, because my wife had surgery for fibroids in the past, she is only able to have children by C-section. So we knew that was going to be the case. So it wasn't any sort of surprise. The date was named, and we got there and we prepared, and then went in for the delivery. They were great. No real issues there. I don't think I would. There's nothing that I came out from there with saying, I was disrespected or disregarded as the father. The actual the birth itself didn't go well. They cut a vein, so there was a lot of bleeding.
Oh my gosh.
So she lost a lot of blood, which I couldn't tell. She wasn't really. I looked at her blood pressure, and it was like 78/39 or some really low number, and I was like, ooh, wow. I couldn't. Yes. But I was there with her. I was holding her hand. I was, just with her throughout the whole process. And like I said, they were very nice. There was not anything that I walked away with and said we were mistreated or I was disregarded as a father. I think at that point, like you say, there's two married people, we're professional people. I mean, they know the people they're dealing with, and they treated us, I guess, in line with that.
Okay. So my other question is, now we've talked about pregnancy, we've talked about the hospital, and we know that bringing a new baby into the world changes the family dynamics. And so the question is, baby's inside mom's stomach during pregnancy, baby's born, now we come home, and now it's different. So how was it like once you got home? Often at times, again, I talked in one of my earlier episodes that back in the day, women just were really pampered. I'm talking back in my day when my brother and sister, had babies. You had a lot of family support. There was the idea that, mother goes upstairs, she's taken care of by mother-in-law or mom, and that's that. It's not the same. Everyone's not working two income jobs like everyone is now. So I'm just wondering, now we've got a whole new little one coming home who's got their needs too. What was that like? And how did you feel as a dad? For whoever wants to start on that one.
Yeah, I'll take it.
Okay.
So it was exciting, but it was also scary, because you have this little precious little thing that depends on you for absolutely everything. And then my wife also had the C-section, and so that's a major
Wow.
surgery.
Yes.
It's and I don't think that we talk about it like it's a major surgery and appreciate it like it's a major surgery, but it is. And
It
so
is.
she's in constant pain. So when we came home from the hospital, I wasn't just taking care of a newborn, I was also taking care of my wife, right? While also working a full-time job and a part-time job. And so being afraid to drop the baby, had a daughter, so making sure that I clean between the folds, that I wipe from front to back, like all of those things that you kind of take for granted. Being afraid that I was going to, drown her, feeding her bottle, making sure the bottle, wasn't too hot or too cold. All of those individual things where it was exciting, but it was nerve wracking. I was tired all the time. When we had our child, my mom was finishing her regiment. She had breast cancer.
Oh,
So
wow.
were she
Wow.
not recovering from that illness, she would have been there every day.
Mhm.
So, in the beginning, later on, of course, she became one of the primary child care providers. But in the beginning, she wasn't there. My little sister often, if she wasn't living with me, and most of the time she was, which was awesome. She was a great second mom to help
Mhm.
out with my
Mhm.
daughter. But it was a scary experience. And then again, because we're not really socialized to care for children, it's not something that kind of comes innately what to do in certain situations, because all I'd ever seen was dads pass the baby to mom, right? But
Mhm.
I
Mhm.
I had wanted to be married and have children since I was 4 years old. I wasn't passing the buck. I
Mhm.
was doing the midnight feedings and all that stuff. My wife just found out a few years ago that the kids didn't sleep through the night. She thought they did, and I was like, no, you slept through the night. I was up feeding them because
Okay.
if you're gonna work 8 hours a day and then come home and cook and clean, you're gonna sleep through the night, right?
Okay. Okay.
So, but it was definitely it was a nerve wracking process. If I could have a child and they be born and skip right to 5, I would, because that birth to 5 years old, everything is scary. Like I don't like that feeling of helplessness, and I think that might play a part in that depression aspect, because you do feel helpless at times, even if you don't identify it as helpless. You do feel helpless at times. You are wondering and worrying, whether or not they're at school or they're at a child care provider, or they're with family. You're worried about their safety. You're worried about their comfort. You're worried about the times when they're out of your care and they can't articulate whatever's going on.
Mhm.
So it's a joyful experience. It's a memorable experience, but it's also very stressful. Or for me, it was a very stressful experience. If there was something that would cause me to not want to have more children, it's that birth to 3 or 4 year old nerve wracking. My child is helpless without me kind of feeling. I don't like it.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Palase, how about you?
Well, I hope I get there sooner than later. I'm still in the birth to 5 right now, so
you can do it.
if I'm waiting to hear that it gets better and better as they get older. But yeah, for me, so um, my wife's mom was there. My wife's mom is a superwoman. She is cook, clean, whatever you need, she can do it. Um, I think initially, um, when I after the baby, I went back to work probably 3 or 4 days after the baby was born. After we got back home, um, I just felt like 3 was a crowd at that point. Um, I didn't really see my place at that time. I just felt like they had it under control, that it was necessary for me to go back to work, and my wife's mom, my mother-in-law, was there. And so, like I said, I think she took care of everything that her daughter needed. She was really, really like there for her daughter, right? And loved her granddaughter as well. So um, I guess initially I was not a strong participant in the process, but my mother-in-law was living in New York at the time, so she had come down for a month, and we're here in Washington D.C. So, um, I was learning some things, and I think my wife had probably had a lot of anxiety about that, about her mom leaving and going up back and just being the two of us. If you asked her, I think she just wasn't sure how capable I would be, and I wasn't really sure either. But like I said, the kind of approach that I had was similar to the pre-birth, where I was just trying to learn things, see how things work. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I had sworn that I would never change a diaper before the baby was born. I was just like, I'm never going to be a diaper changing dad. And to this day, I've already changed way more diapers than my wife has, but way more. But I certainly didn't. I like you, Michael. I mean, this little baby, so small, so tiny, and you just kind of like, wow, I could just drop her and it would be over with. Um, but I think but surprisingly, you're also growing in your comfort level. Eventually because I would never, never hold anybody else's child, right? People would have babies, newborn, 3 weeks old. I'll just be like, no, thank you. I do not want to hold your kid. Um, but my own kid, I got used to it. I got accustomed to it. I got okay with it. I was like, hey, that's my kid. You feel comfortable, holding her like you just like you're holding a football or a soccer ball or something like that. You don't walk around holding it thinking I'm gonna fall and drop it. So I got more comfortable with it. But yeah, I think initially it was definitely, when my mother-in-law was there, I was definitely felt that I didn't really need to participate. I just, anything, go to the grocery store, get something. That was where I felt like that was where they needed me to run errands. And then again, like you said, Michael, my wife had C-section. It was, she bounced back from it pretty well, I would say, even though everything that had gone on, she wasn't, you know, she wasn't held back by it. Um, the first time, I think the biggest thing that happened was my wife went on a CME, a continuing medical education thing up in Baltimore. It was a 2-day thing in Baltimore. And so that was the big, like, I'm leaving him with the baby moment and I'm going to be gone for like the whole day. Um, so that was, I think my baby was born um, end of late October, and this course was like early December. So we're talking about a 6 week
Mm-hmm.
old baby or so.
Mm-hmm.
That was the first time that I got to just be me and the baby. My daughter, I have 2 daughters. So this one is Kensani. Kensani and I were together, and yeah, it was fine. I think it was learning on the fly. Um, and because we're in DC, we're not, neither of us is from here. So there was no real, um, there was always the expectation that I would need to know what I'm doing, right? I have to be able to be left alone with this kid and be able to be the father and do everything and all that good stuff. And I think it wasn't as hard as I thought. I think if you ask me, I would say that from somebody who comes from a background with strong, gender roles, I realized that this is not a hard, this is not hard. Like changing diapers is not that difficult. And, you know, maybe giving the baby a bottle, all these things, burping them and walking with them and giving, the mom a break. I think where I was coming from, this was like the same attitude that I was like, I won't touch the baby, I won't hold the baby. It's the same attitude that I won't be involved in the baby's life. I'll do something, I'll mess up somehow. And also
Mm-hmm.
just, and then it lends itself to the women also corroborating that mindset of saying he's not going to know what he's doing, right? So we're not going to put that on him. So
Mm-hmm.
for us, being that we were just the two of us, and like I said, my mother-in-law lived in New York. She took some days off, or was able to take a month off from work and come down, but she had to go back, and then it was just us. And so that was kind of how it was. So, but also I should say that I forgot to mention a very important fact, which was that we moved 1 month after my daughter was born. So we bought a house and we were waiting for them to build it. And so the house, my daughter was born October 22nd, and we closed on the house on November 8th, and we moved in on November 23rd or something like that. So, so actually our home was full of boxes. So my sort of responsibilities were like procuring the movers and, helping out with that. So my wife, even though she had just had the C-section, she also was still helping with packing boxes, and they were doing all of that stuff. So there was a lot going on, and I think, just my mindset was sort of divided between what can I do to help the helper and, getting ready for the move.
So quite a lot. So listening to you all, and I just want to thank you for sharing your experiences. From the prenatal perspective is get involved, ask questions, let them know that you're there, the providers, because that seemed to make it easier once you moved into the labor and delivery part of the pregnancy, is that you had then established a relationship with the provider. They knew that you're there. It began to be more of a collaborative relationship as opposed to you starting to feeling like you were on the outside. So it sometimes takes you as the individual to put yourself forward to ask questions and to get those responses that you want. And I want to encourage the dads that are watching is to be involved from the beginning part, and to not feel like you shouldn't be. It's also difficult though when the way the healthcare system is set up is oftentimes prenatal appointments are in the middle of the day. And there's the need, to be able to reserve time. I talked last night about leave, maternity leave and paternity leave, and some jobs don't offer that. And so then it's a need to save up time and even money to be able to have that time once the baby is born. So it's a quick, it's balancing the decisions you need to make. So that's one. Number two was that it seemed in the delivery time that things did go well, but I want to echo what Michael says. We hear cesarean section so much. It is major surgery. It's major surgery. And then now we're going home with a brand new baby and a wife who's had major surgery. And if you, from listening to Halase, and I don't know if this is the situation with Michael, you're coming from gender roles where, well, that's the woman's thing, that's her thing to do, but yet she's had surgery. And I'm sure then also having to deal with all the different things, needing to work, help your wife who's had major surgery. Halase's situation, he's moving. With Michael, he's still working, and also his mom had cancer, and so not able to be there. So we need to, for families that are listening, think about the support system that's needed for brand new families. And then also, I just appreciate the fact that you all are saying, I'm afraid I'm going to hurt my baby. I'm afraid that I'm going to drop him. I'm afraid of this and that. And oftentimes we don't really talk to dads about this, that it's okay. It's normal. I mean, just think of any of us, if we've never held a baby, even though you're a woman, if you've never held a baby, you have some concern or fear around that. What am I supposed to do? So I'm so thankful that you all have put that out there, that this is normal, and dads should know that this is a normal way. But there needs to be the ability to say, hey, I've never done this. So I know there are different classes that are offered. I'm wondering if any classes that you would recommend or did you take that may have helped you with getting ready for taking care of your baby after the baby's born. Just throwing that one out there too.
So for me, my first child was born in California, and so we had classes through Kaiser, and so that's where I learned how to uh, change the diaper. Like we would practice with the dolls. I learned how to change the diaper, how to prepare bottles. So in my experience, I did have that, and then for my current job as a dad engagement specialist, we actually have our dads and doulas class, and so for our dads and doulas class, we cover stuff that goes from prenatal all the way up until the child is 2. It includes feeding, both breastfeeding and bottle feeding, changing, preparing the rest of the family for the child. And so there are more often than not, there are going to be classes for the mom, but there are different places like my agency where we do have classes that prepare for childbirth for the dad. And I think it's very important because exposure breeds comfort. So the more I'm exposed to a particular task, the more comfortable I am in doing it. So if I've never done it before, and the first time I hold a baby is when the baby is born, it's going to be a different type of experience. So
Yes.
yeah.
I'm gonna be like, I did the same the class too with in Washington Hospital Center had something. I will say that I'm more of a learn on the job guy. So even though I did that, I can't say that if I were to go back a week after doing that class, I would remember anything that I did.
Right. Right.
Um, and I'm just comparing that to the current state, right? Which is that now, as of today, I it's automatic for me, right? So if I pick up a stranger's baby and they say change that baby's diaper, I know how to do that, or hold that baby, hold that child.
Mm-hmm.
Those are things that are not, now I do it every day. And in
Mm-hmm.
fact, my body has responded in positive ways. Like I have, like my shoulder muscles are like more chiseled. My delts, I have like a nice physique now that where my biceps are a little bit more chiseled. Um, these are things that now that I'm just like a plain old expert in. Um, I would say what I would say is simply that I think a lot of dads can learn on the job, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think the main thing is just the attitude to do so, and the necessity to do so can also come into play. I think if you're talking about it in a way where you're saying they can't, or this is a woman's role or this is a woman's job, I would say that the when you threw there's a statistic that like 74% of African American babies are born out of wedlock or to unmarried couples. And so if you take that and extrapolate it and say, well, maybe they're not married, maybe they're together, still you're going to have a high percentage of couples that are learning on the job, right? Are learning
Yes.
on the fly.
Yes.
And a lot
Yes.
of guys that, are a lot of relationships where, people are together and, you just have to be able to do these things. So I learned the biggest thing is that, first of all, I thought that it was going to stink so bad. I didn't even know that like baby milk doesn't stink. So it's like, I think I was traumatized earlier in life by being on a bus that broke down and a man had his child on the bus and he had to change the child's diaper on the bus. And I never smelled anything worse than that. And so
Mm-hmm.
I was like, oh my gosh, I cannot be having to do that, change a baby's diaper.
Mm-hmm.
But again, milk doesn't cause that kind of
Mm-hmm.
odor, right? So it's
Right.
like, so you learn how to change a diaper without even the smell, right? It doesn't stink. You're just changing the diaper and,
Yeah.
learning how to get through those crevices and all that stuff like that. So I haven't had a boy, so I don't know what that's like, whether there's some
Mm-hmm.
differences there. But I think openness to the process, sort of eliminating the idea that it's like there's something innate about changing a diaper. There's nothing innate about it. When I changed it, I think I always had this pseudo mindset that I'm about to perform surgery, and I just like I'm like, oh, I'm about to perform surgery.
Get the gloves.
You know what I mean? And it's just kind of like it just makes it more fun.
Uh-huh.
It makes it less about the act of changing a diaper and more
Right.
about you're executing like I've got to do this, I've got to fix this problem. Whatever you think about when you're doing surgery, right? So that's how it is for me. Changing a diaper is like doing surgery.
It's
And
interesting
so
that you said that. Because one of the things that I think about, especially when you were talking about learning on the job, is how much pride I take in the feeding, the clothing, the changing. Like it feels really, really good to be like, I did that. Like this is my baby, and I'm responsible. All three of my kids, when they were, well, at least the first two, when they were newborns, they looked just like my baby picture. Like the only difference was our noses were a little bit different. And so I'm like, boy or girl, this is a little me. This is something, this is something that I made. This is my work of art. This is my creation.
Wow.
And that kind of sense of pride with everything that I do. The research shows that engagement actually mitigates depression.
Yes.
And so the way that you smile when you talk about the changing with the surgery, like all of that interaction, and I actually feel bad for the dads that aren't able to, whether it's for work purposes or family dynamic, that they aren't able to have the experiences that you and I have, because we're going to live longer, healthier lives just by virtue of being able to engage with and parent our children. Just kind of that nurturing aspect, like husbandry, that's tilling the garden. Like that's what we do. Like it is, nurturing isn't just a mom's job or a woman's job, but that's a part of our role as fathers, is to care for and to nurture. And that child gives so much back in the way that they smile at us, in the way that they laugh and they giggle. And so, you just I had a flashback while you were talking, like how much fun I had and how proud I was, even learning how to burp a baby. Like I remember how difficult it was and I'd be afraid that my daughter wouldn't burp. And then, like you said, eventually it just becomes old hat. It's like pop her on the shoulder, get her right on that right spot, pop a couple times, burp, pushing. Right. But how nervous I was the first time. Like I haven't even thought about that in a long time. But those were some joyful moments, just to kind of experience that. So I wish more dads had the experience that we're having.
No, I agree. I mean, I enjoy dressing my kids. Now, my wife does it mostly, but actually, I just my wife gets to go to work earlier than me. So a lot of times I just overrule whatever she put out there, right? She'll have, here's the outfit she's gonna wear today, and then I'll look at the outfit and I'll change it up. And not, but like you say, Mike, I mean, there's a lot of joy in it. Like just when you make something happen. I think with children, that's the fundamental thing about it, is that they don't have the ability to do it for themselves, and you're the one who's going to do it for them. And whatever it comes out is something that you created and you did, right? So, there's something to that in terms of how you feel about that. And again, reiterating the idea that just anybody can do it. It's not just have to be the mom. The dads can do these things, and a lot of dads are doing these things. It's just that the challenges that are there are that I think you as much as you want to push for that, there are certain truisms in terms of like the workforce. I think what I've experienced, so one of the things that I've experienced in my marriage is that my wife is actually the breadwinner in our marriage, right? So I would say that I've experienced, I've had to overlearn these things. I'm probably more involved than I want to be if we're talking about the way that I would have liked my family dynamic to be, right? I would have wanted to be that guy that was going to to work, and like the first year. So when my child was born, Kensani was born 5 months before COVID happened, right? And so after she was born, I just wasn't working as much anymore. Things changed for me. So 2020, I think I was off for at least 6 months or thereabouts in 2020. So I really I soaked it up. I took everybody's word of advice to just enjoy the moment. I was like every day waking up, baby laying there next to me. I mean, going from like can't roll over, just sitting there sweetly, and then they start rolling over, and then it's like, and I really, really, really enjoyed that stuff. I mean, I can't even describe how much I enjoyed it. But I think just in our American system where, you know, the need to work is so great, and living in a city like Washington, D.C., you just can't take that kind of time off. And so I think men don't realize that women do get a tremendous tremendous privilege and opportunity to enjoy that period of time. And I think a lot of men, now that you hear more about men's paternal leave, that's something I never heard of until maybe the last 10 years or so. It's a lot of fun, and I think anybody can have fun with it.
So I just want to say thank you so much. We've had a great discussion tonight. I think the takeaway from this, get involved prenatally with prenatal appointments as much as you can. We realize that there are barriers with work and family finances that may not make it possible for dads to be at every prenatal appointment, but try and do as much as you can. It really helps with the rapport with the healthcare provider. It also helps you with your rapport with your baby as well. In labor and birth, none of our dads had any issues because that rapport had been built during the prenatal appointment. So they were able to have good communication during the labor and delivery period. And Michael's situation, it was an emergency cesarean section, and being able to work closely with the physician, I think because of the rapport built from the prenatal appointments, it made that a lot easier. Coming home, I love the fact that both talked about being scared about doing some of the stuff that normally is meant for women in terms of the baby care. And everybody has different ways that they learn. Some will learn from sitting in a classroom, and others learn on the job. And that's just normal. But also some of the joys of being able to do changing that baby's diaper, burping the baby, because I did that, and we've gotten that both from Halase and Michael. So, and these things, because they're involved, help to decrease the possibility for depression post delivery because of the engagement and involvement and feeling a part of. So I want to thank you all so much. I hope that this will be helpful to any men who have listened in and those who will listen in the future. I would ask that if you have liked the content that we've done tonight, that you would like and that you would subscribe to my channel. I want you to also watch for ebooks that I will be putting out very soon. But again, Halase, Michael, thank you so much. Have a really great evening.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.